What's up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about the iPhone XS in 2024 here. And yeah, it's a very interesting phone. I got a couple requests about this phone. And yeah, I don't think, guys, this is a very good buy if you live in the US. Simply because the other iPhones are way too close. So you can see this is still trending for whatever reason around 200 bucks. And if you could find one for like a really good price, I would, if you really want one, pick it up. But I wouldn't get it. I would look at least I wouldn't go any lower than the iPhone 11 because that's also around the same price, 200 bucks. You can see right there. And then also, like I said, I think if you really are looking for an older iPhone, I would go for the iPhone 12. So this phone is also very, very good as well too. If you pay extra 50 bucks, you can get, the iPhone 12, which is going to last you a little bit longer here. But like I said, I understand that people, live overseas. I got a big overseas audience, so the price difference might vary. So let's go ahead and check this phone out and see how is it still performing. It's the oldest iPhone to run iOS 17. And then also this phone, from what we're seeing with the rumors, might get iOS 18 as well too. So that'll be very interesting if this phone does get iOS 18. It'll probably have a lot of the features stripped back. But let's go ahead and dive in here. So the design on the iPhone XS is still a pretty nice looking design. You can see very glossy kind of back on here, so it does pick up quite a bit of fingerprints, but it's still a very nice, very pretty looking phone and very comfortable to hold as well too. I think it's way more comfortable to hold than the newer iPhones, and I think it still looks pretty good. Of course, it does look a little bit dated compared to new iPhones, but still a very classy looking device here. It's IP68 dust and water resistant, and yeah, I don't think the design looks too bad, especially from the front. It just looks like a regular iPhone with a big notch and stuff like that. So overall for the design, it's pretty comfortable, and I think it's aged really well. I think it's a very nice looking phone still. So this is a pretty small phone in 2024 here. It's at 5.8 inch display. So typically most phones these days are like 6.4, 6.5, somewhere in that range, and even bigger. And this phone, it's kind of small, so you can one hand this phone kind of easily if you have smaller hands. So that's one thing that I noticed. And also for the display, I think the display has aged pretty well too here. It's still a very nice looking panel here. It is an OLED panel, and then it does have a 1125 by 2436 resolution, has a pretty high PPI at 458, and I think it still looks pretty good actually. I have no issues with the panel here. I was pretty surprised. The one thing that I noticed, like with the age of this phone, is that in direct sunlight, it's not really that good. So if you're like at the beach or it's really sunny outside, it will kind of, it'll be kind of hard to see. But besides that, colors and everything still look really good, and still a nice, sharp, and vibrant panel. Now let's talk about the overall performance running iOS. The phone is kind of smooth now, so I can definitely see the age of the phone. It's not as fast as I remember it, so I feel like it does kind of have a little bit of stutters sometime, but general performance is really not that bad. It's actually it's not terrible to use, right? It's got the Apple A12 chipset on here. It's 64 gigs of internal storage, 4 gigs of RAM on the base model, and it's still usable, so it's not like it's unusable. But I do notice like little just like animation hiccups and stuff every now and then. Doesn't do it all the time. As you can see, it's pretty smooth now, but just like even when we were like playing the Subway Surfer, if you guys noticed that, it was kind of glitching a little bit or kind of like freezing a little bit. But overall, it's still decently smooth. Like I said, it's not to the point where it's really annoying and it becomes a problem. So somewhat fast on here. You will notice kind of little glitches and animation stutters for sure. Alright, let's talk about gaming performance. So surprisingly, the XS still does a really good job with PUBG. It still plays it at HDR Extreme, and it's very impressive. I think the most annoying thing with this phone with gaming is that this thing does get hot. It gets warm. It's not to the point where it's uncomfortable, but you definitely feel it like back here. Now I haven't had it crash on me or anything like that, but I am a lighter gamer, so I'm not typically like playing PUBG for hours and stuff like that. But yeah, that's one thing I noticed. I was just impressed with the performance. You can see it's not really like freezing or glitching or anything like that. when we are gaming on here. So I think that's pretty impressive that these these iPhone chipsets have lasted such a long time. And yeah, so as far as gaming goes, it still does a decent job when it comes to PUBG. Like I said, in some games, like we saw in Subway Surfer, it was kind of like freezing a little bit. But with this, like it's playing pretty fine. Like with Call of Duty, it plays pretty fine. So like overall, I'm actually pretty impressed still. Let's check out these speakers at max volume. So the speakers are pretty decent on here, pretty good amount of bass quality. No real issue with the speakers on here. It's pretty decently loud, and face unlock does work on here. Now the cameras on the XS, I think they are pretty decent, but you can definitely see the age of these cameras in low light. It gets, pretty bad actually. So it's very grainy. The quality pretty much is gone. But surprisingly, in good lighting conditions, you can easily still get a really good shot out of this phone. It's got a 12 megapixel standard and a 12 megapixel telephoto. It can shoot in 4K 60 with a 7 megapixel selfie that shoots in 1080 60. And I was pretty impressed with the image quality if you put some light on it. The colors I thought were a little bit off, but that can be fixed with some editing. But yeah, I didn't think it was too bad, but definitely it can give you a decent shot in good lighting for sure. And the same thing for video, pretty decent video on here as well too. I thought the video was pretty solid. So overall for the image quality, I think that it's okay, but if you take pictures like a lot of nighttime stuff or even just a lot of low light stuff like just being in the house, you will definitely lose a good amount of image quality or just detail with the shots for sure. So definitely take that into consideration, but image quality is somewhat decent. So the battery health on here is 85%. This phone can still squeeze about 5 hours of screen on time if you're gaming heavy, 4 hours. So the battery life isn't really that great. Maybe you can get a little bit better battery life if you have a new battery, but my experience with the battery life is just kind of okay on this phone. It's not really that great. But you do have wireless charging on here as well too, and yeah, so the battery life is kind of it's okay. But overall, the XS is surprisingly still a somewhat decent phone, but I wouldn't necessarily I wouldn't necessarily buy this phone if you are in the US. You could just get the 11 or the 12 if you really want a cheaper iPhone. But if you're overseas, it's a pretty decent phone. I thought it did really well with gaming, and as far as like the pictures were okay. It's just an okay buy. It's not a terrible buy. So let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.